In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains what to do when you encounter a big problem in your life.
From the perspective of mental hygiene, one of the things I would recommend is that when things go wrong for you, you start at the highest level of resolution in your hierarchy and work upward. You don't say, well, God, now everything's over. You might say, okay, what can I do to ensure that I do better on the next test? So then you could analyze your subroutines, your micro subroutines. Like, how much do you study a day? Well, sometimes people will tell me, I study 6 hours a day. It's like, no, you don't. You sit in front of what you're supposed to be doing for 6 hours a day, but if you actually study for more than 3, I would be shocked. Because I've met almost no one in my entire life who can sustain high-level concentration for more than 3 hours, for more than 6 days a week, for more than a year. You'll just burn yourself to a crisp. So no, you're deluding yourself into thinking that you're studying for 6 hours a day. You'd be way better off to cut it down to 2.5 and actually do it. Like, there's micro routine analysis that you can do. So that might be helpful. Then you can implement that and run it. That's what you do if you're a behavioral psychologist. Someone comes and says, my life's over. And you say, well, let's go for the micro routines. What do you mean? Well, they say, well, I can't be a doctor. Well, okay. Could you be a nurse? Would that work? Could you be
SDA.
Medical technician? Could you be, what else could you be? Could you be a social worker? Etc. Like, okay, so your domain is helpful medical type of person. Well, one element of that is doctor, but it doesn't exhaust the entire realm of possibilities. So I'd say, like, flex up a bit. It's not the only path. And so that would be a more high-level adjustment. That would be a more cognitive adjustment if you were in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's like, let's check out your subroutines, make you more effective at studying, but, let's loosen up your top-level abstractions. You should be a good person, let's say, whatever you decide that means. One element of that is be productively employed in a way that doesn't make you bitter and nasty. Okay, doctor might be one way of solving that, although I wouldn't be so sure about that. But it's not the only way of solving it. So, all right. You go from point A to B. You go from point A to point B, and things can happen along the way. Things you like, positive emotion. You're getting there, plus you're right. Things that produce negative emotion. You're not getting there. Okay, you can either solve them easily, small behavioral adjustment, or you have to go up the hierarchy of value and adjust it with the least possible damage, generally speaking, because that's another rule of thumb in therapy. It's like, I can't be a doctor, so I'm going to be an engineer. It's like, well, no. You've got 3 years behind you. Don't just throw it away. Use what you've already got. Make a minor course deviation if you can do it. And, maybe we could talk about broader scale transformations, but they're costly. Stick as close to the path as you can, while altering it enough so that you proceed on to your final goal. And so, and that leads us, and I think this is where we'll stop today, that leads us to the next part of the story. So, here's the kind of story that someone can tell. I was at point A and I went to point B and here's how I did it. And you're pretty happy about that story. Maybe you go on the YouTube, and I found this a year ago. I had this old car and I wanted to put a stereo in it. And so I typed in how to put a stereo in X old car, and there's some helpful retired southern guy who'd, made a YouTube video out of it. So, and I was interested in his little story because he put a car stereo, he didn't have a car stereo in his car, and he wanted one, and I didn't have a car stereo in my car, and I wanted one. So his little story about how to do that was very interesting to me. So I ran the little tape and I did it. It's like, great. Not particularly transformation, but good enough. Good enough. I got some information. All right, so that's an all right story, and you're running around all the time, interfacing with other people, and you're telling them your little story, and they're telling you their little story. But so that's one thing that interests people, how to do something successfully. But a lot of what people talk about is something different, which is, I was trying to get from point A to B, and it didn't work, and now I'm at a place where it didn't work. And so it's a problem, right? It's like, the world's opened up around me, I don't know what to do. And the reason you talk to people about that is because they have brains. And so do you. And you might as well have 2 brains working on the problem if you can. And if you're reciprocal, you're in trouble, you come to me, and we talk it out. Maybe I can help. And then because we're playing a iterative game. Now you owe me a favor. Now, I'm not going to be too restrictive about that, but socially intelligent people are reciprocal. And Ben Franklin once said, you're new in a neighborhood, what should you do to get integrated? He said, ask a neighbor for a favor. A small favor. It's right, like, will you build me a new house? It's like, no, that's not going to work. But, would you watch my dog's on the lawn, would you watch him for 2 minutes while I run down to the corner store? It's like, okay, they can do that. Well, why would you do that? Well, it opens up the possibility of reciprocal exchange. It's very, very smart, because now they can ask you for a favor. So you get the trade thing going. And people who are highly social are really good at identifying and maintaining reciprocal obligations. So we use each other as problem-solving resources. And a lot of our communication is exactly that. And so basically the story you're telling isn't I was at point A and I went to point B and everything worked. The story is this instead.
Please write your text here.
I was at point A, that's the top left-hand corner. I was at point A and I was going to point B, but something didn't work. And then things collapsed, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on the severity of the event. And the closeness of your friendship, say you're telling this story. You're not going to tell catastrophic stories to someone on a bus that you just sat down beside, unless you have a mental illness. And sometimes, it's the truth. Sometimes you'll sit down on a bus, and someone who has a mental illness will come and sit beside you, and they will immediately tell you horrible things about their life. And the reason for that is they have to. They don't have anyone to talk to. They can't sort out their brains. They're so desperate. They're so ruined. They're in chaos. They're so ruined that the proclivity to proclaim the chaos absolutely overwhelms them. And you just can't deal with someone like that most of the time, because the magnitude of the problem they're facing you with is way beyond your capacity to solve. So it's just awkward. It's not good. Anyways, you say, I was going from point A to point B. Didn't work. Now I don't know where I am. I don't know where I'm going. And I'm lost. And you say, well, in my experience, when I was in a situation like this, I did this, and I know someone else who in that situation did this, and maybe you could try those. Or maybe you just shut up, and you let the person talk. And that's often extremely useful. And the reason you do that is because they're thinking. Because people think they think, but they don't. They talk. Thinking is hard, right? It's a very complex, abstract, cognitive operation. And I don't think that there are many more people who can think than there are people who can really read. And that's probably 2 to 5% of the population at most. And so most of the way that people deal with that is that they talk. And that's their thinking. And so they have some ideas about what might be going on, but they're mixed and muddy. So they're basically throwing out these ideas. Did this happen? Is he like this? Is she like that? It's like, did I do this? It's like, and then they watch you, and if you're nodding about one, they think, oh well, that seems plausible, and they lay out another, and you go, you don't even notice, and they think, no, that's off the table. I didn't think that was a very good idea, but now I've got some social, validation, and soon they talk it out, and instead of having 60 vaguely defined problems, now they have like 5 fairly tightly defined problems. They're feeling a lot better about that, right? Because it's 5 snakes instead of 60, and maybe they can deal with 5 snakes. So you've already helped them a whole bunch just by listening. And then maybe you can be an active listener, and they lay out their story, and you say, well, you said something here that doesn't make any sense with this thing that you said, so, how would you reconcile those? And, it's this dialectical process, and so the person collapses into chaos, and they come and tell you about it, and then you rescue them, if you can, out of the chaos, and then they pop back up the other side.